Ukraine says at least one more round of evacuation is needed to get several hundred civilians out of the besieged Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol, where Ukrainian fighters are still holding out against the Russian siege. A group of about 100 people, mainly women and children, left the plant on Sunday after being trapped for more than 2 months. The operation was led by the UN and the Red Cross, but within hours of the evacuation, Russia reportedly resumed shelling of the plant. The situation remains desperate for those still trapped inside the facility. Previous attempts to establish humanitarian corridors from the area had failed. Up to 1,000 civilians and 2,000 Ukrainian fighters are believed to have ended up inside the plant, surrounded by Russian forces in the last Ukrainian-held territory in the southern port city. Well, in the last few hours, evacuees have started to arrive in the Ukrainian town of Zaporizhzhia. Some of those evacuated have been speaking about the terror they've experienced and of having to live in darkness for more than 60 days.
Yourself how I feel. Use your imagination. As her daughter tries to grab the slippers she holds, I'll hold on to that. Natasha, the scariest part is when they are shelling. When you see a shell exploding and people dying.
What did the
Well, for the very latest, we can go live now to the Ukrainian city of Lviv and join AP correspondent Jon Gambrell. Good evening. What's the latest you have for us?
These evacuations in Mariupol are still ongoing. Now, what we don't know right now, excuse me. Now, what we don't know right now is where the status is of the people who have left the plant. There were some 100 people who were evacuated yesterday. Now, what happened was some have gone on to Ukrainian-held territory, others have gone on to Russian-held territory. This is concerning for Ukraine because officials here say that some of the people that go to Russian territory often are resettled against their will in Russia. But we still haven't heard any word from them. Meanwhile, there are still hundreds of people stuck inside of this facility, and it's a giant facility that dates back to the Soviet era. It has deep underground bunkers that people have been living in for, as you said, over 2 months. It's dark there, the air is filled with dust, and over the last couple of weeks, the Russians have really targeted the facility with airstrikes, including with unguided munitions. Now, these munitions can fall over a wide area and strike a lot of different targets. Satellite photos analyzed by the AP show gaping holes in the facility's roof, and we're still waiting to understand what the situation is inside as of right now, because days earlier, officials had warned that those inside were running out of water, food, and medicine, making it an incredibly dire situation for those remaining.
Presumably some of the people who are actually coming out now can give a more up-to-date version of actually what is the state of the food and the water and the medicines in there. Are we hearing anything from what they're saying?
We understand that it's been dark in there, that they're surrounded by those who were wounded in the fighting, and there were a lot of wounded fighters who were still there, who were part of those holdout forces that were in the plant. Now, as of right now, we're still unclear about what the situation is ongoing with the evacuation itself. As we've said, there's still hundreds of people who are still in there, and it's unclear when they'll be able to have a convoy of buses and ambulances to be able to go in there, wave the white flag so that the Russian forces don't fire on them and there's not any sort of misunderstanding, and pull the rest of them out. Russia has been concerned about other fighters and wounded soldiers leaving that facility, so it's really a complicated situation that the UN and the Red Cross now find themselves in.
Indeed, but this is actually the first time really that the UN and the Red Cross evacuation procedure has actually worked. All the times before they've been, stopped and by that, but this can be regarded as a success, can't it?
For the Red Cross and the UN, this comes after days of negotiations, and just getting these few hundred people out does represent a step forward for them. But obviously, we still have these hundreds of others inside still, and the UN and the Red Cross will have to find a way to somehow get the Russians and the Ukrainians to agree on terms to allow them to leave.
Now, let's talk about the wider conflict. We're hearing that there's been Russian rocket attacks on a bridge, which is a very crucial bridge. What does this mean, and what are you hearing about actually what has happened?
This is really concerning for Ukrainian officials. This attack has targeted this bridge outside of Odessa, and for your reference, Odessa's to the southwest of Ukraine on the Black Sea. This bridge has been struck thrice. It's done incredible damage to the bridge, which does railroad traffic as well as vehicle traffic. And the reason why the Ukrainians are so worried is because this bridge and Odessa in general is about 50 kilometers away from Moldova and this breakaway region of Transnistria. Now, what has been going on is this breakaway region has some 1,500 Russian troops in it. The Russians refer to them as peacekeepers that have been there for years. Now, this Transnistria has been not really in the news so much, but it's really important now because in 1992 it fought a war against Moldova and declared itself as a separatist region. Now, no country in the world regards this area as its own country, but these Russian peacekeepers have been there, as Moscow calls them. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a series of mysterious explosions that have struck a giant radio antenna, a state security building, a military unit, and other areas. That has led to some people to be concerned that this could spark some sort of unrest there. Moldova is not a part of NATO, like other countries that are in the surrounding area. Ukraine's also not a part of NATO. And that leads to some concern that something could happen in Moldova, or, more worrying for the Ukrainians, that conflict could spread over into the west, and that could open a brand new front. Keep in mind that most of the fighting that we see now is hundreds of kilometers away in the east. Fighting a two-front war could be disastrous for Kiev.
Jon Gambrell, live in Lviv. Thanks very much indeed.